Good afternoon, all, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar. If you are first joining us for the first time, I would like to warmly welcome you to the Nigerian Bird Atlas webinar series. And for us joining us for the first time, this is a monthly webinar that is being hosted by the Nigerian Bird Atlas, where we have people from various backgrounds giving us their own perspective about birds, conservation, and the environment. So as we join in today, I will want to really welcome us and thank you for joining us. And for today, even though we're just a bit ahead of the time, we'll just go ahead and start. And then as people join us, they will kindly mute themselves and then we'll continue in that order. If you have any question, you can drop it in the chat or you wait and then raise your hands at the end of the presentation. So for today, we're going to be having Mr. Longji Bako. Mr. Longji is a lecturer with the University of Jos in the Department of Zoology. He is also a research associate with the A. Leventis Ornithological Research Institute. And he is part of the ESCO in Jos Bird Club and a nature lover. And for today, he's going to be giving us a talk about evidence-based conservation and community engagement. So I promise us that this is going to be a fun and educative ride, and I will kindly ask us again to mute ourselves and then enjoy the talk by Mr. Longji. Mr. Longji, you're welcome. You have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Madam Manchin. I want to say thank you for assuring us that it's going to be interesting. Yeah, so I hope that it will be. I am very happy to share with you all. I find it a rare privilege. I hope you can hear me clearly.
Sure, we can hear you.
Okay, great. Okay, so if you can hear me, I'm happy to share with you what I prepared to share. Can you see my screen? Can you see my screen?
No.
Okay, I'll do that again. Can you give me a few minutes?
Yeah, we can see your screen now.
Yes, you are up now.
Okay, great. All right, so for the past weeks, I have been in Cambridge, the Department of Zoology with the Conservation Evidence Group, and as an intern of the Students' Conference on Conservation Science. And I had an interesting experience, and it's about this idea that I want to share today. So I'll be talking about evidence, but don't worry, we're not taking anyone to court today. We'll be talking about scientific evidence, and then we'll be talking about community engagement. This presentation is like an A and B sectioned kind of presentation. So we have the conservation evidence aspects and the community engagement aspect. I'm sure that many of us who have been involved in the Nigerian Bird Atlas project, who have been going out to record birds, you maybe at one point have been called by Professor Oof to tell you Are you sure what you saw was what you reported? And on many occasions, you may struggle to try to prove that because you need an evidence. If you have a camera like Harun, like myself, like Elisha, like Ringim, then you may have photos to present. That is some form of evidence to back up the fact that what you have seen is really what it is. So, excuse me, I have this. So, as we all know, research is the driving force of development of every nation. Without research, the backbone of development is broken. And Africa, as it's widely known, we are referred as the underdeveloped or developing nations. Wildlife and biodiversity in Africa are in a crisis, a serious crisis, and we need to do more to be able to rescue what is left. It means that if we agree from the beginning where I said that research is the backbone or driving force of development, then maybe Africa needs so much more research. Is that the case? Is that what our problem is? Is it that we need more research? In my own understanding and the way I view what we do, I always feel like our research should have so much impact, so much so that we are able to influence policies that will lead to real life development. So, and if you want to have your research turn into policies that would lead to development, then you will need to back them up with evidence. When managing land for conservation, specifically like what we are interested in doing now, we have to take difficult decisions. There are decisions that we have to take that may be difficult. So we may struggle with these decisions. The people who are around the community where we live may be impacted by the decisions that we take. And these decisions may not be easy ones for us. So we would have to ask some questions. What are the best actions to take that will benefit our birds and biodiversity that we want to preserve? How effective will the actions that we will take be? Are they feasible for us to even do? Do we even have enough resources to be able to implement the ideas that we have for our conservation projects? To be effective in what we do, conservation practitioners and managers, we need to be critical thinkers and deep in understanding. We will need to think beyond just, okay, I want to go out there to the field and maybe just count birds or record insects. But to what end? You want to see how this explains whatever that is happening in the planet. And this requires you to think beyond just formulating your easy questions. So we now ask, what is evidence? The people in the legal profession will easily come to terms with this word evidence, because they always use it to back up whatever case that is presented before them. They believe that whatever case you have, if you have evidence, then you can win your case. And that is simply how I see it as well in this case. So evidence, we're talking about facts or observations that are presented, relevant and useful to support an assertion. That would be evidence. So if you have relevant information that is used to assess one or more hypotheses related to question or interest, then what you have is evidence. And scientific evidence specifically refers to information that has been collected using scientific method. Scientists are interested in seeing that whatever you present as results is something that can be reproducible in other parts of the world, provided that all other conditions are equal. The theory and application of evidence-based practice has been a key feature in medical and healthcare. So conservation biology practitioners have tried to adopt this idea from people who are in the health profession, who have been relying on evidence for them to forge ahead in their profession. So we would think that what we do, we don't see immediate results. We don't see immediate effects or impacts. So because of that, people in conservation science feel, okay, we can be able to neglect the use of evidence. But you know, in the medical sciences, for them, okay, if you are using this treatment, make sure it works, because if it doesn't work, you may kill someone. But our own case may not be immediate as theirs, that you see someone dying immediately. But we also have our own share of crisis. It takes some time to manifest, but of course, it does manifest. And I want to believe that all of us know right now, scientists are doing a lot of research to try to see the link between the emerging infectious diseases and biodiversity, and how we cohabit with biodiversity and nature at large. So evidence is important. So in the medical world, I have this illustration to give, where they have been presented with evidence, but they have delayed to implement the use of evidence. So there's this disease, or let me say, a medical condition that is called SID, sudden infant death syndrome. So this SID became something like what we have right now, but an epidemic, because it was not all over the world. It was mostly in the developed countries where children were dying. So children were just dying, and you have about one out of 250 births would die. That's an enormous number, right? 1 out of 250 live births would die. In the early 1980s, then this scientist, Dr. Peter, now tried to do some research. Okay, he tried to find out what must have been happening while children were dying. So, but there was something that he found out that was the same across, and it's the fact that most of these children, the parents of these children, have reported something in common, which is that the children are sleeping on their front. So they lie the children lying on their front, like in the photo there. So he tried to do some deep research to come up with evidence, to come up with links that, okay, if you lay your baby sleeping on the facing downwards, then they are likely to choke and die. He found this evidence to be true. He found, with good sample collection, with good analysis, that this is the situation. But so from 1980s, the National Health Scheme delayed the implementation of his findings. These findings were supposed to have been implemented immediately. Okay, there are facts already, but you would look at in this graph, it says that from the 1980s up to around 1992, so until the 90s, about like 10 years before they started to implement the recommendation from that research, from the evidence that was presented. And they reported, there was a report of a drastic drop in the death of infants from 1 out of 250 to 1 out of 3,000. That's something very very serious. And I begin to just imagine, okay, this is a good achievement, yeah? There is a result now, and there is recommendation that has been put to use. But what would have happened within those 10 years or so after this recommendation was put on the table and there was delay due to, government bottlenecks and all of those protocols that they need to pass through? So I mentioned earlier that while conservation biologists were going out to do their own research, not paying attention to evidence-based approach, the medical science have learned their lessons, and for decades they have started what is termed as the evidence-based medicine. And we have the headquarters in Oxford University in UK. Now there is the evidence-based conservation, so conservation evidence group, which is in the University of Cambridge, Department of Zoology. Making informed conservation and ecosystem management decision is based on sound understanding of relevant evidence. You need evidence, you need to understand how to synthesize, build up evidence in order for you to make informed decisions. Failure to include scientific evidence in decision making would reduce the effectiveness of management or decisions that you will take, and may even be detrimental, because when you take the wrong decisions, it may be detrimental, and you will waste resources. So talking about research now, like I asked a question earlier, whether our problem is about the number of information that is available out there, or is it the accessibility that is the problem? No, but there is an increased wealth of conservation science available. There are resources out there accumulated. If you look at this graph here, on the graph it says, okay, there are some things in the chat. Maybe I should look at what we have in the chat. Okay, all right, so if you look at here in the chart, you will see that there has been increase in the number of journal articles published from 1995 to 2019. To 2019, there is an increase in accumulation of research. And if you look at the year 2018, you would see that the increase was massive. You have about 5,184 articles that have been published alone. So, and I try to do, okay, if you do a little calculation, in a year, you have 365 days. So you would say that there were about 15 research articles, publications every day in the year 2018. So, and these are online materials that you can access. So we're talking about just biodiversity and conservation papers. So is the accumulated knowledge or accumulated body of knowledge, the papers out there of conservation science, are they being used for conservation or for conservation projects? I'm afraid the answer would be no, because we know that scientists, many people, and this is happening all around the world, that people prefer to use just past experiences of themselves or of others. So mostly people do things based on that. So person has done it before, and that is why I'm doing it, without really asking if that person who did it succeeded, what was the result, and all of that. And if we continue to do that, then it means that we will just be wasting our effort and will just be effort in futility. There's a clear gap between science and decision making. This is happening all over the world, like I said earlier. And this gap is what is referred to as the research implementation gap, which is not supposed to exist, because it's supposed to be that when we do our research, it should translate into something useful, into something of impact that we can use to implement other projects. Our accumulated scientific knowledge is not being used effectively in conservation on the ground, and that is the fact. And if we continue to neglect evidence, practitioners and policy makers use experience-based information rather than scientific evidence, like I said earlier. So this slide is presenting the evidence of no evidence use in conservation projects. So if you look at on this slide, it says that only 23% of decision makers use scientific papers when compiling nature reserve management plans. This is in the UK as developed as it is. And only 10% of conservation management decisions in Australia use scientific evidence. About 66% in California use peer-reviewed journals when they're trying to get information that has to do with plant invasions. This is commendable. Scientific literature constitutes only 2.4% of the information sources used by conservation practitioners in Brockland, that's still in UK. Only 33% of its scientific papers on conservation assessment between 1998 and 2002 have led to implementations of some action. And only 20+% of conservation professionals in Switzerland use international scientific journals for their decision making. On the slide, I don't even have anything to talk about, to present on our own case in Nigeria. And this is something that hopefully we will try to do. So out there, this has something that is being done in the name of conservation. So in the UK and other countries around the world, they try to do these things they call the bat bridges, where they assume that when you build this, it's going to help the bats to not collide with big trucks on the road, and it will reduce the mortality of bats. But over time, it's been proven over and over, and it's known that it doesn't work. It doesn't even affect anything. But these things are still being installed at a high cost of about 2.5 million pounds. This would be a lot of wastage of resources. And also, under EU's recommendation on agricultural policy, people are being told to put a lot of nest boxes at a very high density to aid birds. But every ornithologist can tell you for a fact that having birds at this density, as it looks, what we have looking like the white dots in the, I don't know how you see it on your screen, are nest boxes. And if you look at this density, it's so high. And like I was saying, every ornithologist will tell you that most bird species will not breed successfully under this kind of high density. So what is conservation evidence? Conservation evidence is a free resource summarizing the evidence for conservation intervention. I'm talking specifically about the Conservation Evidence Project of the Cambridge University. It gathers evidence using subject-wide evidence synthesis. So it collects information based on subject matter. If we are trying to look at bat conservation, bird conservation, mammal conservation, small mammals, we want to look at landscape conservation, farmland conservation. So all of this Hello.
Go ahead, we can hear you now.
Did you miss me for a long time?
No. Just briefly, I needed to mute everyone, so please continue.
Okay, all right, thank you. Thank you. All right, so I was saying that the Conservation Evidence Project is a free resource which can be found online. There's also the offline versions of it now. And what they try to do is to summarize evidence for conservation interventions. They try to put in synopses for different kind of projects that you are interested in carrying out. So if you are interested in bat conservation, bird conservation, conservation at the landscape level, species level, and all of that, you can find that on the website. In order to reach a decision, conservationists have to use and combine various sources of information, including evidence on the effectiveness of different strategies. And you have to look at the cost, the feasibility, and the acceptability by stakeholders. Also, you need to ensure that limited funds are used, because I know there's this thing that people in economics will tell you that efficiency it has to do with you being able to carry out projects or acquire something at the best price or the best cost and the shortest time possible. That is efficiency. So if we want to do a project, the cost is also important, the feasibility and all of that. And now the process for making evidence-based decision, you will need to consider possible actions. You will need to combine documented evidence with experience and knowledge. You need to consider the quality and relevance of each piece of evidence, considering the likely benefits, the harms, the cause, and acceptability, like I said in the previous slide. And then you need to make your judgment based on how you put together all of this information. You'll see that this is how the website looks like. This is how it looks like on the Conservation Evidence Project website. So you would see the amphibian conservation, the bird conservation, bee conservation, farmland conservation, and all of those case studies. So if you are trying to do a project and you are wondering, okay, will this work? Will this method work? If I would want to protect this, how do I go about it? Yeah, it is good for you. You can think about it, but of course now there are resources for you that you can just visit. And this slide also just shows, it's just talking about some case studies of what things people have done in different parts of the world. All you need to do is to just look at your own context, look at your own realities and how these informations can fit in to help you guide your decision making. The general idea is also being summarized in this book called What Works in Conservation. This book is aimed at just putting the summaries of what works and what does not work, so that you don't have to bother yourself about trying to do what does not work. It is not to say that there is harm in trial. Yeah, you can also go ahead to try things for yourself. But if you want to do a high cost project, you want to do a project. If you want to do a project,
10 seconds.
Sorry?
15 seconds. She muted everyone.
Okay. Are we together? Please, I would like to know
if... Go ahead, we can hear you.
Okay, I think I observed that everyone has been muted and they can't hear. They couldn't hear me.
She'll be able to hear you, so please go ahead.
All right then, thank you. Okay, so I was saying that the What Works in Conservation book has a summary of what works and what does not work. And this is important because it's about bringing all this community of people working in conservation science to submit your evidence of the fact that, okay, this thing works this way. If we do it this way, it works. If we do it that way, it works. So how about trying to look at from different parts of the world? You see, if there is a consensus about a certain way of doing things. So if there is a consensus, then you know that you are likely to succeed when you do your project this way. So this slide shows it's like a flow chart of you if you want to make decision using the evidence-based information that you have. You will need to identify the problem. You need to scan for potential options, check if there are options that are available. Then find evidence, look around for where you can find the evidence. Weigh the pieces of evidence, try to see how strong this evidence is. The strength of evidence would be in the consensus coming from all the reports of what works in whatever you want to do or what does not work. And then it now guides you to take your decision. So it's the same thing in here in this chart, where you have to do a systematic collation of scientific evidence. You get all the practical experiences of people, the local and traditional knowledge, put them all together. So what you have as a systematically collated information or evidence would be in a group called the scientific information. What you have from the practical experience and local traditional knowledge would be your experience-based information. Now you will need to integrate all of these sources explicitly so that it can lead to your evidence-based decision. On the website, you would also have, what is called the evidence to decision tool. This is a useful tool if you want to carry out a project and you want to take the evidence-based approach. So it just gives, you can download this and use it as a template so that it just guides you and you say, okay, the first step is for me to define the problem, look at the targets, your ultimate goal for any action that you want to take, describe the relevant ecological, physical, and social context of your underlying decision. Also look at if there are barriers in your own context, then gather the evidence from different contexts and try to see how it works on your own case, considering your own peculiarity. So you need to identify potential actions, you need to assess focal effectiveness using evidence from the peer-reviewed and non-peer-reviewed scientific literature. And also all the kind of sources that you can get. Assess also the financial costs, your resources that you need to carry out your project. You need to consider acceptability to self. So whether you yourself, you accept this approach that you want to take, and how about the stakeholders and those that this, whatever intervention you would do would be affecting. But the whole idea is so that when you are trying to make your decision, is coming from the summaries of the evidence, the information you have gathered to guide you to make your decision. So why consider evidence? Projects are more likely to be successful when you make use of evidence, and it reduces the risk of your reputation. Because if you are just trying out things that you don't know that it will fail, and when it fails, it means that there is something about your capacity or your capability to carry out that certain project. Projects are more cost effective, and then you avoid wasting money and time and all the effort that you need to put in a project. Organizations and individuals are less subject to criticism if you use evidence or when you assess the evidence that are before you before taking decision. Decisions are more transparent. You learn from past successes and failures. There are less knowledge is lost both within and between organizations. Because when you have evidence, it's easy to interact and share knowledge between NGOs, government organizations, and all the groups practitioners of conservation projects. Funders can learn about the effectiveness of the actions. They can consider funding and they can consider funding your project because they know that what you are saying that you want to do, other people have done it and it has worked. This idea is being widely accepted now by funders. On the conservation evidence project, now there are champions of the project, including, as far as I know, Ruford, People's Trust for Endangered Species, Frog Life, and other bodies like that. Even our very own, the Age 11's foundation are funders. So funders are interested in this idea and this approach. And you would see that when you try to apply for some of these grants, for some of these projects now, they have a column where they ask you for evidence, for conservation evidence. So, and what they want is for you to visit this conservation evidence website, check for what you want to do, the kind of project you want to do, and how other people have done things that worked out compared to what you are proposing. And if it is backed by the evidence that is available, then you have even better chances of being funded. I'm sure people who have applied for Ruford recently would have seen that. If you try to apply for People's Trust for Endangered Species, you would see that. If you want to do some amphibian projects that will be funded by Frog Life, you would see that. So using evidence will help us to avoid confusion. It will help us to avoid confusion. So you know exactly where to go, whether you're going to the left or you're going to the right. The process of using evidence is a way of learning from our collective past failures and successes, so that we do more of what works and less of what does not work. Because what's the need doing what does not work? By avoiding ineffective, suboptimal, or harmful actions, there is potential to save time, money, and every resource that we need to carry out projects. So, why dissipating energy when there is an easy way out? Why taking the hard way when there is an easy way for you to just go search for evidence? Okay, there is this evidence and it exists. You just make use of it, adopt it, and make it yours and do your project. By using evidence drawn from a wide range of sources and ensuring local knowledge is incorporated, because local knowledge is important, we can foster engagement, and ultimately we can support for management actions and improve the chances of our projects succeeding. What things do we need to consider when trying to make evidence-based decisions? We need to consider local knowledge. We need to consider indigenous, traditional, and experiential knowledge and expert opinion. All these are important. We need to check the social values and cultures. We need to look at the economic cost and then the resources that are available, and also the feasibility of the projects. At this point, I would like so just look at this slide very well. And if you think that there are other things that we need to consider when making evidence-based decisions, I would be happy if you can just type it in the chat. Thank you so much. So why is using scientific evidence important? Like we have started, we continue with that. Okay, I just try to acknowledge this Dr. Cochrane, who started the evidence-based medicine, from whose idea the evidence-based conservation came from. So when you use evidence-based decision, it helps to facilitate systematic collation of and synthesis of evidence. So it helps you to bring together things that are working and things that are not working. And it increases the quality of evidence, because it means that researchers would now be asking more of the right questions, such as, if I do this, how do I do this to save this species? What do I do that will protect this species? Rather than just what is this species and how many are they in this place? All this information is important. We need to know to identify species. Yes, we need to do that. We need to be able to understand their biologies. Yes, we need to do that. But also very important is the actions that we need to take that will protect them. It will help to reduce bias and just picking what we think looks pleasant to us. And it will increase transparency of decisions, increase effectiveness of management, identify gaps in knowledge. In summary of our conservation evidence lecture, evidence-based decision-making helps to avoid bias, increase transparency, and increase effectiveness. Systematic reviews and synopsis. When you visit the website, you will see the synopsis also available. They focus on scientific evidence synthesis and critical appraisal. Synopsis and decision support tools aim to present scientific evidence in an easily understandable and accessible way. Yeah. Evidence-based decision-making helps to avoid bias. Okay, I just spoke about this. All right, so if you permit me, so I'll talk about, I told you there is the part B of this. And the part B of this is where we'll be talking about the engagement of communities in projects. All right, so I'm sure many of us who have been going out for Bird Atlas project will tell that when you go to a community to Atlas, you feel more comfortable even when you go to the bushes, after you have spoken to the people in the community, as compared to when you are just out there. You are not sure. Every movement you want to know who is there. But if you have spoken to the people in the community, it lessens your tension. It makes you feel more at home. And many times we have met with people who followed us to the field. I'm sure it was Ene who spoke something about that, who wrote something about that in the last trip in Gombe. It is a very good action to take when carrying out projects. This aspect, this community engagement, is a chapter in one of the books about what works in conservation by Professor Will Sutherland. And I am contributing in this chapter that has to do with community engagement. And that is why I felt to share just a little out of it. I'm not sure we're going to take a lot of time on this one now. So I will begin with this quote by Margaret. She said, "Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, is the only thing that ever has." And it is true. Teamwork is what will help whatever you want to do to succeed. Yeah, we all will agree to this, that as the community of the Nigerian Bird Atlas project continued to expand and enlarge, the success cannot even be compared to when we had a few people starting in 2015. So conservation is not only about the biodiversity, the birds, the butterflies, and all the other wildlife out there that we love to conserve. It's also about the health of the entire ecosystem, because their life and their livelihood is dependent on the ecosystem. Also ours. Diverse human attitudes, the perception and behavior that we find out there in communities. These attitudes do not just start in one day. These are attitudes that have been passed down to generations, and they are most likely to be passed to the next generations. And when you carry out your conservation project, your project is going to live with these attitudes, with these perceptions. So it is important to start with the communities. The natural environment is embedded within a cultural, political, economic system in which people and their livelihoods are being affected by conservation decisions made. The idea of fortress conservation, that is the idea where humans separate themselves from nature and say, okay, oh, here we are humans and we need to try to protect nature. It's an outdated idea. Now we know better that we are part of nature. And when we protect nature, we're protecting our communities, protecting ourselves. Community engagement, as defined by the Center for Disease Control, they say it's the process of working collaboratively with and through groups of people affiliated by geographic proximity, special interest, or similar situations to address issues affecting the well-being of those people. I try to put it also in context and say community engagement is the process of working in collaboration with a group or groups and subgroups of people affiliated and defined by geographic proximity, interest, and or similar situation to address issues affecting their well-being and livelihoods. I would like for you to as well look at the summary of this definition and also put in the chat if you have some recommendations, you see some weak points on the definition. I will appreciate that a lot. Also, we can look at it as collaboration of vision. So collaboration of your vision and the vision of other groups, vision and or action by planners and or groups of people who are common by means of geographic affiliation or common interest to achieve the goal of that vision through collective participation. Again, I would appreciate if you can put in the chat which of the definition you feel is better. This, talking about the second one, not the CDC one, or this. I appreciate that, thank you. Also, community-based conservation is simply the effort towards conserving species in which the local community is involved or they participate as fully as possible. The main goal of community engagement are to build trust, enlist new resources and partners, and create better communication and improve well-being outcomes as successful projects evolve into lasting collaborations. Community should be involved in conservation decision-making for a number of reasons, and these reasons are for moral and legal reasons, because many times these places we want to protect or the species you want to protect are living in a place surrounded by community or within a community. And people around there have some legal claims over the land and all of those resources. So you need to engage them for moral and legal reasons. You need to involve them for improved evidence for decision-making, because local and indigenous communities hold information that is useful to science. They may tell you where you can find what, they may tell you what works and what does not work as well. You need to engage them to build support for conservation. Interventions made in the name of conservation should benefit, or at least they should not impact people negatively. It should not be that as we have started our project, then we have stopped the livelihood of people. I will remember vividly when we were rounding up from Aplori and we were zealous, that time where that you want to just go out there and start to do conservation. Our idea was, we feel like people should just be arrested. Nobody should be seen carrying any wood, firewood, and all of those things. But many a times this idea does not work. You have to involve the community, even from the very beginning of your project. And your project is supposed to be a win-win situation, both for you, your project, the nature itself that you're protecting, and the people and the community. Other specific reasons why you need to engage communities: you will get to know the community better and gain an understanding of their needs and ambitions. It increases chances of wide acceptance of a project, and then the solutions that you want to put in place will run smoothly because you will get other ideas to make it robust. Diverse perspectives empower decision-making and improve the strength of your decisions. It increases transparency and consequently help you to earn the trust of the community. It creates an avenue that brings individuals and groups together. And in this discussion, they can find solutions to other problems. When working with community, you will need to identify certain groups. Who are the affected groups? Your project, who are the groups that your project will be affecting? How about the concerned groups, the communities, including governmental? You're talking about whether there are bodies that have also they are concerned about the place, about the decision that you are taking, how it will affect their concerns and their own interests. Whether they are NGOs or they are governmental bodies. There are dependent groups. These are groups that their livelihood depends on whatever project you want to do. Maybe the landscape that you are interested in will be impacted. So you would have to consider them as well. There is also a group called the impacting groups. Who are this group of people that their activities or the activities of their members are impacting on the natural resources that you want to protect? Are there Fulani herdsmen who are there grazing? You need to know that. There, in the southern Kaduna, there are parts that have been taken by security, but by insecurity. I'm talking about insecurity, by bandits. So these ones, the activities will definitely be impacting these landscapes. So you need to know which people are impacting that landscape or the natural environment. The special circumstances are, we're talking about whether there are changes that have to do with stochasticity, with uncertainties, changes in maybe seasonal migrations, or, okay, if you are protecting is it a plant? Does it fruit at a certain season? So what is the season? When will you find it? Are we talking about some raptors that are migratory? When would you find them come around this community? And when are they not around? You need to know all of this. You need to identify managers and users. You need to know the holders of knowledge and skills, people who would help you. You need to know neighbors, people who are staying adjoining communities or adjoining, yes, body of collection of people where your project is domiciled. You need to identify the traditional authorities. Are there chiefs that you need to pay homage to? Are there people that you need to consult when you want to take certain decisions? The national authorities need to be identified. Well-trusted individuals within the community, you need to get them and know who they are. In conclusion, if you fail to engage community, they will not understand what needs to be conserved. They wouldn't even know what they need to change because, like we said in the beginning, they have certain behaviors, certain attitudes that impact on what you are trying to conserve. If you don't tell them that at certain time of the year, this bird will be breeding, and if there's a lot of noise around this place, then they may not breed successfully. They will fail to breed successfully. Then they will not know. They will continue to make their noise. So you need to engage them. And if they think that the project you are doing is just a project and you are on your own, then it makes things difficult for you. But if you engage them, then it makes life easier for you and then for your project. So before I round up, the idea is to also have people discuss with me. If you have some cases where you have engaged community in certain projects, what worked and what didn't work, maybe your certain approach that you implemented, did it work? Did it not work? You can send me that on my personal WhatsApp. I will appreciate that because it will help to build the body of the write-up that we are doing. And thank you for listening. So, Madam Nanchi, over to
Yes.
you for questions.
Thank you so much, Mr. Longji, for this interesting and educative talk. Yes, from the onset, I told you that it's going to be interesting. And indeed, it was interesting. And I believe that all that join in today's call have learned something from today's presentation. So, and before I go ahead and give any summary, please, I will give now the floor to all those that are on the call. If you have any question, you can drop it in the chat, or please, you can kindly put up your hand, and then you can ask your question directly to Mr. Longji. Thank you. Okay, is that to say that we have understood all that has been said here and we're ready to go out there and provide evidence for the different work that we are doing? So we don't have any question for Mr. Longji, any clarification you need, or something that you have to add to today's presentation? Okay. Mr. Longji, you can kindly stop sharing your screen.
Okay.
Okay, Mr. Ringen, please go ahead. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Lange, for that very exciting presentation. And we sincerely thank you for sharing the experience with us. So clearly, we can see that in the last decades, there is an increasing interest about biodiversity conservation and community awareness. Yeah, but without a doubt, most of this awareness is in the United States or North America and parts of Europe. But when it comes to community conservation science, and especially if we are talking about biodiversity conservation, of course, you cannot rule out Africa, because still to date, African continent is one of the richest continent in terms of biodiversity. In fact, about more than 60% of birds, for instance, in Africa are endemic to Africa. So, but it appears that we have a large gap, when it comes to community-based conservation, especially in our case in Nigeria. So what do you think can be done to address some of these challenges in terms of community conservation? We know that the Nigerian Bird Atlas project is doing a lot of work, to increase community conservation and community awareness and environmental conservation in the country. But then we need to do more. And of course, if we are talking about conservation in Nigeria, we know what the government is doing. Of course, there are other NGOs in the country, but I think we still have a lot of work to do. So what can you advise? And from your experience, this experience you share with us, how can you suggest a way to address some of these local problems in Nigeria?
Okay, Mr. Ringim, thank you for that question. Even though I was paying attention to hear specifically the problem that you're saying that we have with community engagement. But I agree that we are not engaging communities enough. And I think that maybe the foundation of conservation, maybe in Africa, in Nigeria, did not really let us know that it's supposed to be a community-based kind of field or profession. So we feel it's more of a foreign people's thing. But there's something that I learned, and it is that in every project that you want to carry out, it's even a necessity that from the onset, even when you are trying to plan the project, engage the community. There is something that is called FPIC, which is the free, prior, and informed consent. So it's saying that from the conception of your ideas, you need to go there and speak to some people. Recently, we did a project, carried out a Ruford project to help protect some population of vultures. How this project started was, after sighting the vultures, we talked with people in the community. Oh, wow, I think we're going to find some funding and come and do a project here. I can tell you that after some years, someone within the community who we have kept in touch has been asking me, when will you come for this project? When will you come for this project? Until when we were able to grants, and Ruford graciously funded it. We're able to do this project. They are happy to help us when we get the idea, move us around, take us to this place and take us to that place. So I feel the community is not the problem. I think it is that we need to know that they are valuable from the beginning, that they will provide us with important information. So we don't have to wait that when I start my project, then I will now come and tell them, okay, CEO, I am doing a project in your community. It will not work. But if from the onset you get them to be part of it, it will be a good success, I assure you. And so, but like also you were talking about most of the research are out there in the West. And this is why you and I are doing what we are doing. And I believe that with time we would catch up. Also, I don't know if I've satisfied your question.
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much.
I've seen also Lucky chat in the chat was asking about alternatives. Yes, definitely. If you want to do a project that would affect just the basic. Yeah, so alternative is definitely what you need to consider when carrying out conservation projects. Thank you for that question, Lucky. Thank you, Wingen.
Okay, so thank you everyone for the question, Madam Ringim and Lucky Atabo. And if there are no more questions, I will want to say on this note that one thing, if at all you've not learned anything from this presentation today, just know that conservation evidence, without conservation evidence, there is no how you prove the credibility or the repeatability of the methods you apply while doing your own project. And if the community are not involved, be sure that you are heading to just a complete and a huge fall. So for conservation projects to strive and for us to record success, just the way we are doing it in the Nigerian Bird Atlas, which of course you can see the evidence from the map that is up there at the website, you know that without people, you can't move. And without evidence, you can't get funding. So we thank you, Mr. Longji, once again for taking out time to educate us today about evidence-based and community involvement in conservation projects. And on this note, if we don't have any further contribution or question, I will want to say you can kindly unmute yourself and put up your camera. Let's see your beautiful faces, and then we can tell each and everyone on this call goodbye before we finally wrap it up. So thank you so much for joining us again. Yeah, so thank you
Hello,
so much for
everyone.
joining.
Hey, Male Ringi, let me see your video again.
Yeah.
Thanks
Dr.
for sharing
Samson,
that experience with
Thank
us.
you so much.
Emeka
Thank you for
Law,
taking
Michael
our time.
Manja,
Well done.
Wadi, Patty,
I'm good, and
Longji,
you?
we need to see your face. The Aplori MSc student, Deji,
Thank you.
Oh,
Dr.
upload students, I
Palombo,
greet you.
Joy Isham, Kevin Ayers, for all on this call, James Oni, thank you so much for joining us, and do have a wonderful evening. And please keep a date with us. Next month, we'll have another exciting presentation. So please stay tuned. Thank you so much and good night.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye-bye.
Everyone, thank you, Longji.
Thank you, Dr. T.
Okay. Bye-bye, everyone.
Yeah, bye. Well,